Look here at this chart. Here we're seeing two actual portfolios from two real people. The first person retires a mere 1 year later than the other person. And as you can see, the person highlighted in blue, they maintain a great portfolio. In fact, they grow their portfolio over the course of 16 years. The other person, indicated by the orange, they run out of money in year 14 and have no money left. The sequence of returns risk is serious, and in this video today, I'm going to show you how and why this happens, and also 3 tips to mitigate this so we can proactively identify and avoid any issues ahead of our financial independence journey. It's like, how can 1 year make such a big difference? So oftentimes on this channel, we pull up this calculator right here. And you can see this portfolio balance of $1.8 million, and we assume a market growth rate of 10% per year. And this is what a lot of finance influencers get wrong, including myself. See, we just put up this cool little fancy chart of 10%. But the problem with that is, if you look right here, let's say you retire early at the age of 40, you have $1.8 million, and you're going to live off of $72,000 a year, and you're going to adjust that every year for inflation. All looks fine here because you can scroll down here and look at your portfolio balance. All the way down here, here we are at the age of 80, you have $33 million. In any YouTube video, one person could easily click off. They're super excited about the fact that, hey, I'm going to be able to do this. This is going to be great. But they're actually misguided. So let's get real. There's actually 2 scenarios that can happen when you retire. The first one is you retire and it's a great year in the stock market. Like kind of last year. In 2023, we saw a total stock market return of 26.05%. The second scenario is you retire and it's a bad year. Like, for example, 2022, where we ended up being negative over 9%. And see, that small little adjustment of just being negative in your first year can have a significant erosion and significant impact on your future opportunity and performance of your portfolio. So let's look at 2 examples before we get to the 3 tips on how we can mitigate this problem from happening in the first place. And what we're going to do is we're going to assume that we retire at the age of 40 years old because we're gangsters and we saved up all of our money to have a portfolio of $1.8 million, giving us in our first year $72,000 a year to live off of, which is the 4% rule. Okay, let's say you're 40 years old. The year is 2001. And then the other person is 40 years old, but they retire in the year 2003. Look at the big difference here on this particular chart. This is a scatter plot. And what you're looking at, they both start at $1.8 million, but then you can see they kind of gear off track from each other. The very first one actually ends up right now with these are actual returns over that period of time. So in 2024, they grew their portfolio to over $4 million. The other person, look at that. They're sitting with almost less than $1 million. Just about 24 years later. In 2001, these are the actual returns, the actual inflation amount, and the actual returns on a $1.8 million portfolio. So here's a problem. $1.8 million in 2001 immediately gets greeted with a 19.6% drop in the stock market. That means your portfolio declined by $339,000 plus an additional $72,000 that you withdrew for your retirement. So you could enjoy life, so you could go do things, so you could have your everyday expenses covered. Oh, okay. Then you're followed up with a negative 3% in 2002. And then finally it recovers with an 18% improvement in the year 2003. And then you have a kind of a few years of greatness, 8%, 4%, 4%. Look at that, 24% in 2007. So you would think, hey, things are great. But look at that. Even in 2007, your portfolio is still down by $400,000, considering that you're adjusting for inflation and using the 4% rule, which means at that point in 2007, you're withdrawing a total of $84,000 a year. So right here at the end, this year, which is year to date for May of 2024, your balance is only $1,024,000. Now, here's the trick. If you retired at the age of 40, even today, you have a lot of hopefully great years ahead of you. And my concern is, will that money actually last you until the age of 70, 80, or 90? That could be risky. And the last thing we want to do is have to be forced to go back to work because we ran out of money. See, back when you were 40 in the year 2001, everything looked great. Now things are looking scary. But check this out. Let's say instead of retiring in 2001, you decided to retire in 2003 with that $1.8 million. Look how different the starting year really impacts that portfolio all the way to today. 2003, you have a positive 18.31% return. And now your portfolio grows over the next year to $2,044,000, which means you withdrew all that money and you got even more money back. That's awesome. That's exciting. And then you go through even the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009. But look here today, you're at $4 million. Now, here's two people, one retired in 01, one retired just 2 years after. One has a significant amount of money here today in 2024 compared to the other one. And it had nothing to do. One did not spend more money than the other person. Both lived off of the 4% rule. The only difference is how the stock market performed in the first 1 to 2 years of their initial retirement. Now that's kind of weird, isn't it? Let's take one more example before we get to how we can figure this all out. 2007 versus 2008. Now we're not talking about 2 years. We're only talking about a difference of 1 year between retirements. Look at 2007. You end with well over $3 million. But if you would have waited just 1 year to retire, your portfolio today is actually under $2.5 million. Let's take a look at how that all shook up. So the year's 2007, you retire with your $1.8 million, and you got a stock market return of a very impressive 24%. But then it's followed up with the great financial crisis, which returned negative 13% in 08 and negative 30% in 2009. So, okay, you could say, well, that's great because then we get a 19% return followed by a 14% return and then, a small little 4% return and then a 28% return. But it doesn't matter. You're still using the same amount of money to withdraw. And here in 2024, you're now at $3.1 million. And with the inflation adjustment, you're now living off of $108,000 every single year. If you would have waited just one little tiny year to retire, just 1 year, same scenario, you're greeted with a 13% drop, followed by a 30% drop with the great financial crisis. And you're like, oh crap. Now look, you're left with $2.2 million today. So let's talk about 3 ways that you can avoid the sequence of returns risk in this scenario. Number 1 is to balance the risk. So what we looked at is total investment in stock equity. So you're 100% in stocks without any balance in bonds. So what you could do is balance whether that's 80-20 or 70-30 or even 50-50 to give yourself more bond exposure. Now the trick with that is you're going to have limited downside, which is a good thing, but you're also going to have limited upside. So in those years that we looked at that return maybe 28% or 30% in the stock market, with a bond portfolio, you're probably going to have a little bit less when the market's going up. But if the stock market goes down, especially in the beginning of your retirement, that could really balance you out so that your money can last for the rest of your life. Now, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to do like a bond portfolio, a targeted date fund, you can do option 2. Now, I'll be transparent. Option 2 is what I would be doing, and that is dynamic spending. Now, what that means is on the years that are negative, and especially if it's the first year of retirement, we're going to live frugally. We're not going to spend a lot of money. Let's talk about Netflix and chill. We're going to sit on the couch, watch Netflix. We're going to do things that don't cost money, like go to state parks and walk and enjoy life and do things that don't cost a lot of money. See, just because it's the 4% rule, that doesn't mean you have to live off of 4%. You can adjust that dynamically. We can adjust that down if you have room to cut some things from your budget and hang on until the stock market recovers. But there's a benefit to that. When the stock market is booming and it goes up, so let's say we have a year like 2013, stock market returns 28%. Well, we could then decide, hey, we're up. Let's spend more than 4%. Let's go on a cruise. Let's go on an extra family vacation. Let's do something epic with this particular year. See, you can have your frugal years, you can have your amazing years. And at the end of the day, you're still living in control because you're doing dynamic budgeting. Now, I will tell you this. I don't know your personal finance situation, so always check with a financial advisor. Don't listen to somebody on YouTube like myself, who some people think I look an awfully lot like Woody from Toy Story. Yeah, so you got to take that for what it's worth. The third option, and I'll be honest, I don't really like this option, but it would actually work very good for certain people based on your personal finance, and that is buying annuities. Annuities are basically a guaranteed fixed income. So what you do is you take your portfolio balance, you buy into annuities that return you fixed guaranteed monthly income. In fact, my parents are on that. It's great for them. But I don't know if I really want to do that personally. I like having the ability to have dynamic budgeting. I like the ability to have a little bit more control. Once you buy into an annuity, they're not easy to get out of. So that means you are committing to that fixed income. So if you want to have like a good year in the stock market and maybe take some extra trips, you're going to have to budget based on that fixed income. So that's just something that you need to keep in mind. Now, here's what I need you to do. If you found value in this, make sure you're sharing this video on Facebook, X, and Instagram, because we need to help other people that want to do financial independence avoid this costly mistake. And after you're done sharing that, make sure you check out this video next, and we'll see you on the next video.